Hi, I'm Bruce Helander reporting for the Huffington Post at the Boca Raton Museum of Art in Florida. The museum is showcasing a triple home run of the works and intimate photographic images of the late 20th century's most influential artist, you guessed it, Andy Warhol. This show is in 3 parts. Warhol on vinyl, the record covers. The second show is iconic prints from the Mark Bell collection, including soup cans. But prints can't talk. Fortunately, we're here with a man behind the lens for the show, Bob Colacello, in and out with Andy, who I'm sure has plenty to talk about. Good morning, Bob.
Good morning.
You got your start, as I recall. You were at Georgetown University in School of Foreign Service, and then got a master's degree at Columbia in film criticism.
Yes.
And wrote a very interesting review on Trash, an early Warhol movie that Andy happened to see. And as I understand the story, they called you and said, come on over here, and could you do a few articles?
I started writing a few film reviews for the magazine, and then one day Andy and Paul Morrissey, who directed the films of Andy's and was very much sort of in charge at the factory then, said they thought I should be the new editor. And
so 6 months later, you were running this magazine that was disorganized.
23 years old and still at Columbia working towards my MFA.
The notion of having a magazine and then doing a portrait and then maybe eventually selling the portrait, this businessman, Andy, certainly had on his mind. I think that interview became, under your tutelage, just a remarkable historic document.
The thing about interview, having Andy as your publisher was very helpful because people like Mick Jagger or Jack Nicholson or Raquel Welch would come for lunch at the factory, in some cases to have their portraits done, and then those very same portraits as we see in the record cover show here in Boca Raton, the portraits of Mick Jagger became a record, cover, Diana Ross. But we had those people there, and we'd say, why don't we sit down and do an interview? And we'd tape record them over lunch. But it was a very documentary approach. It was almost exclusively tape recording. Andy really thought writing was passé. That, Andy wanted everything to be fast, easy, cheap, and modern.
And not necessarily edited.
Right. Now, and that was his motto. If he thought if something took too long or cost too much, it wasn't really the right thing for you to do. So I got involved in everything, including taking photographs to go with my sort of parody of a society column, which was Andy's idea, just write everywhere you went, every day for lunch, cocktails, movie premieres, dinners, and mention every name, famous or not. Then they all would want to buy the magazine. He was kind of this very primitive but very effective marketing genius, Andy was driven. He grew up in extremely poor circumstances, and I think he never wanted to. He always feared going back to that. And no matter how successful he was, how many portraits he sold, how many exhibitions he had, he always was pushing for more. He chose images that the mass public could relate to. Marilyn, Elvis, Liz, Jackie, hammer and sickle, dollar signs, Campbell soup. But he dealt with them in such an ambiguous way. Was he glorifying these people and things, or was he critiquing consumer society, capitalist society? Well, what is the true meaning of these works? And you could look at them all in so many different ways, and that's what I think has kept the intellectual, curatorial, let's say, and critical elite constantly looking back at Andy's work. It's so much about the times.
This entire show is based on candid shots, and I think that's really the great quality of this show.
And no one saw me as a photographer. I was the editor of Interview, so they weren't like thinking, oh, this picture's going to go someplace, It was just, and we were all friends, and so they are very candid, and I wanted the photos to feel as if you really were at the party with me, if you were looking, and you were in the middle of it all. So the reader would feel, well, we're really there having lunch at the factory with Mick Jagger and Andy Warhol,
And these shots have this great intimacy and immediacy that are still vibrant many, many, many years later. And so we're delighted to have a look at this great show. I'm also very fortunate to have this chance to speak with you. So this has been a very interesting and memorable interview, and I appreciate your time, and thank you so much.
Thank you, and I want to thank the Boca Raton Art Museum. It's my first solo show at a museum, and I'm really thrilled.